classes that we teach at Irvine Valley College, the entrepreneurship series is probably one of the most intense, not so much academically. This is a 200 level class, not necessarily transferable. What it really is intense about is preparing you as an individual to go out and create your own business. This class is called Business Models. So we're going to sit down and go over this prior to the final, and I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm looking for in the final. That being said, let's talk about putting it all together in the process. This final, it's a course about you forming the building blocks to create your business. Your final is all about you creating your own business model. It's about providing you with the tools to be able to do that. Start this week laying out your plan for your company. If you have no company or at a loss for an idea, visit Spectrum this week or go shopping on the internet for ideas. If you're really struggling that you have no idea what to start, drop me an email and I'll work with you in the process. Really, I want you to create a company, even if you have no intention of ever implementing it. I want you to go through the process to think, if I'm going to start a company, which business model suits my ideas, which business model suits my own personality, my type, because there's a variety and we've covered a ton of them, but there's even more out there. Literally, business models are as big and as creative as there are people on the planet almost. Here is probably the single best tool I've ever seen in the world of business. It really sits down, and if you pay attention to it, you can create an entire business plan in 20 minutes to 30 minutes, just simply sketching out exactly what you want to have. Here are what we call the 9 building blocks. We've already covered this. We started covering this in weeks 1 and 2. You really need to know a little bit of the jargon as you go through, but it should be inside your head. You shouldn't have to refer back to things, but of all of them, a couple ones, you need to know your customer segment. Who is your customer? The value proposition. What value will you bring in services or products to your customer? It's a big thing. If you can't define what value and what separates you from the person next door to you who may be actually in the same business, if you're not better, if you're not bringing something distinctive, then why do you exist? Literally, I'm asking that question. You need to ask yourself that question, because if you don't ask yourself the question, your potential customer will. So that being said, let's go through them briefly. The customer service, the value proposition is big. The channel that you go through, the communication channel, the distribution channel, the marketing channel, how you go about doing that. What is that relationship that you have about your client? Are you going to sit down personal sales? Are you going to be cold and just do strictly internet? Are you going to do this? Pay attention to what you're doing. Make certain you look on the series of revenue streams. I was a little bit shocked. I've always assumed 3 or 4 revenue streams. I didn't pay attention until a couple of years ago. I started teaching this class, and all of a sudden, whoa, there's a whole series of revenue streams. And pretty much the creativity is the how you can go out and buy a product or buy a service is limited by the imagination. But define your revenue stream. Just all by itself, you may take a service over here and redefine how you receive the revenue from it, and that could be your unique value proposition to your customer. Look on the resources that you have available to you. Just 2 years ago in the United States, everybody's throwing up their hands saying, oh, there's no heavy metals to produce batteries for cars. Actually, now there was one mine here in California. Now there's 5 different sites under exploration as the demand picks up. Oh, there's no lithium in the United States to make batteries, only in North Carolina. No, right now there's actually 9 sites under exploration looking for heavy industry to move in. Look on the resources that are out there. Sometimes people have always assumed, because of the fact that the way it's always been. Don't be one of those people. You need to be the entrepreneur that finds that niche to go out there and use your creativity, your initiative, your chutzpah, and that whole thing of grit to go through in the process. What are the key activities to implement it? And then what are the partnerships that you need, the key partnerships that are out there, the internal ones that you have with your own team, and the external ones, maybe even building a virtual corporation in the process. And then what is the cost structure? How you sit down there and pay your bills? You're going to sit down there with the virtual corporation and make certain all your services are farmed out to other firms to avoid any overhead with staff. Not a bad idea, but map it out in the process. Customer segments, know exactly what the segments are: mass market, niche market, segmented market as you go through, a diversified market, or multi-sided. Pay attention. If you have to, go back and review the different aspects of it. Look on the things that really influence customer decisions. Of course, you know about the 4 Ps: product, price, place, and promotion. We talked about that. But that being said, you also have all this demography to deal with about family. If they're 20 to 30, the chance of starting a family is much higher than those in the 50 to 60. You have different aspects of it: social class, culture, subcultures within the culture on top of it. Recently, we had somebody win a competition in a pitch contest, and they're focusing on one specific culture and their business idea, and there's already people lining up to possibly financially support that in the process. Think about that aspect of it. Psychological influences, what's out there about your product, about your service. Can you sit down there and get people excited about your product over another one that's already been out there for a couple of years? Make your product different in the process. And the situational influences. Then look on the different 5 things when it comes down to the different segmentations of the markets: geographic, demographic. Clearly, there's no question California is very different than the East Coast or the Deep South. You have that aspect of it. The demographic: Irvine is very different from San Bernardino County, even all by itself. The psychographic segmentation, breaking it up by values, attitudes, and interests, and the benefits and the volume. Walmart is very different in the customer and the product versus Costco as you go through. So think about all the different things, but especially keep in mind the value proposition that you're going to go and bring forward. Newness, performance, customization, all these factors really that's offered in services and also in product. The value proposition, probably of all 9 of them, is the most critical thing that you can define in the process, making certain that you have a unique thing. So that being said, put it all together, start knowing these different components to prepare yourself for the final, because the real final doesn't take place in this class. The real final takes place out in the business world when you launch yourself out there, when you're ready and you're prepared and you put it all together and hopefully draw on some of the material from this class to sit down and become a successful entrepreneur. Take care.